July 15th, 2026. At 6 a.m. Eastern this morning, United States Central Command forces began launching waves of strikes against Iran. Not a single strike package, not one coordinated operation with a defined beginning and end. Waves, plural, sustained, sequential, overlapping. Designed to further degrade the military capabilities Iranian forces have been using to attack commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, which means designed to dismantle, piece by piece and layer by layer, everything the IRGC has built to contest the most important waterway on the planet. And while those waves are executing right now, Chabahar port is burning again. Shiraz is registering explosions. Underground missile and drone facilities in the Khuzestan province are being targeted. The before and after satellite imagery coming out of the latest strike sites shows blast craters where military installations used to be and smoke columns where target infrastructure existed before American precision munitions arrived. This is what the return to sustained daily combat operations looks like. The memorandum of understanding is gone. The ceasefire is gone. The diplomatic framework is gone. What remains is the battle for the Strait of Hormuz, and it is being fought with everything the United States military has available in theater. But let's back all the way up, because to understand what is happening at 6 a.m. on July 15th, you need to understand what President Trump put on the record about how this moment was reached. His framing, stated explicitly in recent days, was precise. Iran was given every chance to negotiate a deal. Every chance. The 24-hour ultimatum was not a surprise escalation from a comfortable equilibrium. It was the final step in a documented sequence of extended deadlines, formal frameworks, warning after warning, and a memorandum of understanding that Iran signed and then violated while the ink was effectively still wet. The American position, as stated by the president, is that Iran made the choice that led to this morning's 6 a.m. strike package. Iran chose to blow up several ships last week. Iran chose to formally reject the ultimatum and argue that the United States had no legal authority to issue one. Iran chose to mine the Omani shipping lane. Iran chose to fire on commercial vessels using the designated passage. Iran made every decision that produced the current operational reality. And the current operational reality is daily bombings, daily attacks, waves of American air power rolling over Iranian military targets from the pre-dawn hours until the bombs run out, and then again from the next sortie cycle. The July 14th strike record provides the immediate context for what 6 a.m. on July 15th means. U.S. Central Command completed additional rounds of strikes at 10 p.m. Eastern on July 14th, hitting dozens of military targets near the Strait of Hormuz. Fighter aircraft, drones, and naval vessels launched precision munitions in a single operational wave that lasted 7 hours. 7 consecutive hours of American air power delivering precision munitions against Iranian military targets. That is not a strike package in the conventional operational sense. That is a sustained air campaign compressed into a single extended operational window, continuous enough that Iranian air defense commanders had to maintain active engagement postures for the full 7-hour duration, consuming radar time, communications bandwidth, and the psychological endurance of operators who cannot stand down because the next weapon might be inbound at any moment. The 7-hour wave of July 14th is the operational template that the 6 a.m. launch on July 15th is following. Daily, sequential. Without the rest periods between strike packages that would allow Iranian command and communications infrastructure to reassess, repair, and reconstitute. Now let us talk about what is being hit, because the target selection on July 15th tells a strategic story that goes beyond the tactical objective of any individual strike. Chabahar port was hit again. This is the Indian Ocean gateway that American strikes had already destroyed in earlier rounds of the campaign, the economic bypass that was supposed to allow Iran to sustain revenue and supply chains outside of strait-adjacent Western control. Hitting it again is not redundancy. It is a deliberate communication. Even the infrastructure that was already destroyed is being struck again to prevent any reconstitution effort that Iranian engineering teams might have begun during periods of lower strike intensity. The control tower at Chabahar was specifically targeted again. Massive smoke columns visible on camera. Direct hits documented. The port that was supposed to be Iran's economic escape valve from Western sanctions is being denied not just its original function, but its potential rebuilt function. Every day that Iranian repair crews attempt to restore something at Chabahar is a day that CENTCOM adds it back to the targeting list. Shiraz. This is the target that carries the most significant strategic weight in the July 15th package, and it is the target that most of the conventional coverage has underweighted. Shiraz is not a coastal city. It is not a port. It is not adjacent to the strait. Shiraz is located in Fars province, deep in the Iranian interior, away from the naval infrastructure and coastal surveillance installations that have been the primary focus of the strait-oriented campaign. The explosions registered in Shiraz on July 15th. with smoke visible rising past the buildings and above the mountain line on the horizon, are being assessed as targeting underground facilities holding drones and missiles. Underground. The same category of hardened, concealed subsurface infrastructure that previous analysis identified as the most difficult targeting problem in the entire Iranian military posture. The underground missile cities from which TLs emerge to fire and then retreat, the hardened shelters along the coast where fast attack boats disappear between operations, the tunnel networks under mountain terrain, where the most capable elements of Iran's retained offensive capability are protected from aerial attack. The Shiraz strikes are not hitting the surface. They are targeting what is underneath the surface. That requires a specific category of American munition, penetrating bombs designed to drive through reinforced concrete and detonate inside the hardened underground space rather than on its exterior. The F-15E Strike Eagle can carry those weapons, and the Shiraz strikes are what the application of those weapons to underground Iranian military infrastructure looks like when it produces visible surface effects through the mountain line. 4 strikes on Sarbandar, Mashhar, and the surrounding Khuzestan province area were additionally confirmed, with witnesses assessing the targets as missile sites. Khuzestan province sits in the southwestern corner of Iran, on the eastern bank of the Shat al-Arab waterway that forms part of the Iran-Iraq border. It is one of Iran's most oil-rich provinces and one of the geographic zones through which the IRGC maintains missile infrastructure positioned to threaten both the northern Persian Gulf and the land approaches from Iraq. Striking Khuzestan province missile sites in the same operational window as Shiraz underground facilities and Chabahar port infrastructure is not a random collection of targets. It is a simultaneous, multi-directional attack on different categories of Iranian military capability operating in different geographic zones, designed to force the IRGC to assess threats from multiple directions at once, rather than concentrating its defensive attention on any single operational sector. And then there is the most analytically significant targeting detail in the July 15th operational picture, the one that has received the least attention relative to its strategic implications. The footage released from the overnight strikes shows American air power hitting defenses at an airport, not simply striking military infrastructure adjacent to an airport, targeting the defensive systems at an airport whose runway has been physically blockaded as in deliberate physical obstruction placed on the runway surface, specifically to prevent aircraft from landing. When you hit the air defenses of an airport while its runway is blockaded, you are doing one of 2 things. You are either eliminating a surface-to-air missile battery that happens to be positioned near the airport, in which case the blockaded runway is incidental context, or you are systematically removing the defensive coverage from a facility that American operational planners want access to, clearing the threat environment around an airfield in preparation for a future operation that might require that airfield to receive American aircraft. Read that second possibility carefully, because the combination of a blockaded runway and American strikes specifically targeting that airport's defenses is not a targeting coincidence. It is a targeting sequence, and targeting sequences have purposes that individual targeting decisions do not always make visible until the sequence is further along. The battle for the Strait of Hormuz is where the most immediate operational stakes of July 15th are visible. Reports from inside Iran confirm that the strait remains closed to commercial traffic as of this morning. The IRGC Navy fired on 2 ships in the past 24 hours, continuing the pattern of active interdiction against commercial vessels attempting to transit despite the American military's declared commitment to keeping the waterway open. Very few ships are actually moving. The gap between the strait being declared open as an American policy position and ships actually transiting the strait as an operational reality is the gap that the current strike campaign is designed to close by eliminating the IRGC's physical capacity to execute the interdiction it is currently conducting. 7-hour strike waves and 6 AM launch packages are the operational mechanism through which the American military is attempting to reduce Iran's capacity to fire on ships faster than the IRGC can maintain that capacity under sustained targeting pressure. The question of which side wins that race, American degradation versus Iranian maintenance of minimum strait interdiction capability, is the operational question that determines the strategic outcome of the current phase of the conflict. Now, let us talk about what is happening with Iran's counterstrikes. Because the IRGC's continued ability to fire back after weeks of sustained American strikes tells you something important about the residual capability problem that the current campaign has not yet fully resolved. Bahrain was hit overnight, hit heavy, hit multiple times, with air defenses working continuously to intercept incoming Iranian missiles and drones. Confirmed Iranian aerial attacks intercepted and destroyed on the morning of July 15th. The IRGC released footage of missile launches it claims were directed at Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain simultaneously. And the IRGC subsequently issued a list of claimed strikes that deserves careful analysis, not because the claims are reliable, but because the specific targets the IRGC is claiming to have hit tell you what the organization most wants the world to believe it can do. The IRGC claimed missile and drone strikes on a U.S. satellite communications center, an air defense radar installation, a Patriot air defense complex, a U.S. military base readiness facility, and HIMARS multiple launch rocket system platforms in Kuwait. Take those claims at significant discount. The IRGC's documented record of inflating post-strike claims is extensive, and the claims about specific high-value targets like Patriot complexes and satellite communication centers require physical verification before they can be treated as operational information. But notice what the IRGC is choosing to claim. It is not claiming to have hit barracks or fuel storage or logistical infrastructure. It is claiming to have struck the specific systems that give American forces in Kuwait their missile defense capability, their long-range communications, and their artillery reach. Those are the claims that carry the most psychological and strategic weight if accepted at face value. The IRGC knows that an audience processing those claims without deep skepticism will conclude that Kuwait's defensive and offensive military architecture has been compromised. Whether or not the claims reflect reality, the choice to make them reveals exactly what outcome the IRGC is trying to produce in the information environment. The impression that its retaliatory strikes are systematically dismantling the American military's ability to project power and defend itself across the Gulf region. Treat the claims with the skepticism they deserve, but understand the strategic purpose the claims are designed to serve. There is a possible U.S. cruise missile visible in footage released from inside Iran, appearing to be engaged and shot down by Iranian air defenses. The visual, a bright light tracked across the sky, disappearing, followed by audible anti-aircraft fire, is the kind of footage that Iranian state media will cycle continuously as evidence that Iran's remaining air defense architecture retains functionality. Whether the object was an incoming American munition or something else, a drone, an Iranian test, an Iranian air defense round producing its own visible signature, cannot be confirmed from the available video. What can be confirmed is that Iran is claiming the footage shows an American weapon being destroyed, and Iranian state media is using it as a demonstration of continued defensive capability in an environment where the systematic degradation of Iran's air defense network has been one of the primary objectives of the American strike campaign from the beginning. A drone is also confirmed down in Basra, Iraq. The identification of this drone, whether American or Iranian, whether attack drone or surveillance platform, is currently unknown. Basra sits on the Shat al-Arab, the waterway between Iran and Iraq that gives Iranian military infrastructure in Khuzestan province direct proximity to Iraqi territory. A drone down in Basra could be an Iranian attack drone that failed to reach its intended target. It could be an American surveillance platform that was engaged. It could be an Iranian drone that was itself targeted by American or Iraqi defensive systems. The ambiguity of the Basra drone report in the current information environment is not unusual. Complex, fast-moving military operations in contested airspace consistently produce initial reporting with more questions than answers. But the fact that drone activity is reaching Basra's airspace while 4 American strikes are simultaneously hitting Khuzestan province tells you that the southwestern corner of the Iran-Iraq border zone is one of the most kinetically active geographic points in the current operation. Now, let us talk about the 2 strategic announcements from the Iranian side that will shape the arc of this conflict in ways that go beyond the current strike exchange. The first is Pickaxe Mountain, the highly secretive, deeply hardened nuclear facility concealed beneath a mountain in the Natanz region, the site that Iran's government describes as the most fortified nuclear installation in the world, built specifically to withstand exactly the kind of American and Israeli air power currently being applied against its military infrastructure across the country. An Iranian official, speaking publicly, stated that if this facility is struck, the region will turn to hell. That is not a vague rhetorical warning. It is a specific statement attached to a specific target, designed to function as a deterrent against the American commitment to nuclear disarmament that has been publicly stated as a non-negotiable objective of the current campaign. President Trump has responded to the Pickaxe Mountain question directly. The United States will take it out, one way or another. Read that formulation carefully. One way or another is not the language of a president who is uncertain about the objective. It is the language of a president who is certain about the objective and is keeping open the question of which instrument will be used to achieve it. The strategic significance of Pickaxe Mountain in this conflict cannot be overstated because it is the site around which every previous version of the Iran nuclear confrontation has ultimately organized itself. It is the reason the bunker-busting munition inventory matters. It is the reason the B-2 Spirit, which can carry the massive ordnance penetrator, the largest non-nuclear bunker-busting weapon in the American arsenal, designed specifically for hardened underground facilities, is relevant to the current operational picture, even if it has not yet appeared in CENTCOM's published strike footage. The Iranian claim that Pickaxe Mountain cannot be touched is a deterrent assertion. The American counter-assertion that it will be taken out one way or another is a deterrent rejection. when deterrent assertions are rejected publicly by the nation against which they were directed, the next event in the deterrence sequence is the attempt to execute the threat. Pickaxe Mountain is the threshold that, when crossed, transforms the current campaign from an operation designed to force a negotiated outcome into an operation designed to permanently eliminate Iran's nuclear program, regardless of what negotiated outcome is or is not available. That threshold has not been crossed yet. President Trump has placed it on the record that it will be. The second strategic announcement from the Iranian side is more immediately operational and more immediately dangerous. An Iranian member of parliament, and Iran's former foreign minister, publicly proposed that Iran launch attacks on American military bases in the region and kidnap American military personnel to hold as hostages. This proposal was not made in a classified briefing or through back channels. It was made publicly, on record, by named Iranian officials. The strategic purpose of the proposal is transparent. The calculation is that holding American military personnel as hostages would create a political constraint on American military action that the IRGC's missile and drone campaign has so far failed to produce. The calculation is wrong for reasons that the historical record of American responses to personnel hostage situations in conflict environments makes clear. But the public nature of the proposal, the fact that Iranian officials are discussing it openly rather than treating it as a classified operational option, tells you something about the institutional desperation driving that portion of the Iranian leadership. Officials who are winning the strategic engagement do not propose kidnapping enemy soldiers publicly. Officials who are watching their infrastructure destroyed, their logistic corridors severed, their air defense networks systematically eliminated, and their strike attempts produce diminishing operational results propose kidnapping enemy soldiers publicly. The proposal is a measurement of the regime's felt pressure, not of its operational confidence. The Israeli strategic calculation also requires direct attention because Israel's absence from the current strike package is one of the most analytically significant features of the July 15th operational picture. Israeli intelligence has assessed that the United States is ramping up preparations for a possible return to full-scale war with Iran, potentially within weeks. An Israeli source stated it directly: there will be a war. The only question is when. The collapse of the MOU, the confrontation over the Strait, and Tehran's latest operational decisions are viewed in Jerusalem as signs of renewed and sustained escalation, rather than another temporary disruption in an otherwise viable diplomatic process. Israel is not sitting out this fight because it lacks interest in the outcome. It is calculating the moment of maximum Israeli contribution to a campaign that it assesses is moving toward its most decisive phase. The question of whether American strikes can degrade Iran's military infrastructure to the point where a coordinated U.S.-Israeli operation against Pickaxe Mountain and the remaining nuclear program infrastructure becomes operationally executable is the strategic question that Israeli targeting planners are analyzing in parallel with the current CENTCOM campaign. The Israelis will re-enter this fight. The assessment from Israeli sources is that it is not a question of if, it is a question of when the operational conditions are favorable enough to justify it. The air picture above the Iranian theater as of July 15th provides a specific window into the operational tempo that these waves of strikes require. Multiple refueling tankers are visible in open-source air traffic tracking. A P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft is airborne. The tankers are the logistical backbone of a sustained air campaign at this geographic scale. Without aerial refueling, the range envelope within which American strike aircraft can operate is dramatically reduced, and the time they can spend on station is constrained. The fact that multiple tankers are visible simultaneously tells you the strike packages are large enough and sustained enough to require continuous tanker support, not periodic top-off cycles. The P-8. Poseidon is a different category of indicator. Its primary mission is anti-submarine warfare and maritime patrol. Its presence in the operational airspace at this moment, while IRGC anti-ship missiles are being fired at commercial vessels and at American Navy destroyers in the northern Arabian Sea, while Iranian submarine capability, though limited, remains a potential threat to American surface vessels in the confined waters of the Persian Gulf, signals that the American maritime surveillance architecture is maintaining persistent coverage of the underwater domain alongside the air campaign overhead. The open-source picture represents what is publicly trackable. The platforms operating above and beyond what Flight Radar 24 can detect are the operational core of the air campaign, and they are not visible because they are not squawking civilian transponders. The before and after satellite imagery that CENTCOM is releasing as documentation of the strike campaign's results is itself a strategic instrument. When CENTCOM publishes imagery showing a before state where Iranian military infrastructure exists in recognizable functional form, and an after state where blast craters occupy the same geographic coordinates and nothing that was there remains standing, it is not simply documenting operational results for after-action review. It is communicating to the Iranian command structure, to regional governments watching the conflict, to commercial shipping companies calculating risk premiums for strait transit, and to the international financial markets that price oil based on the strait's operational status. That the American military is capable of reducing specific Iranian military facilities to craters with documented photographable precision. The imagery is a message. The message is, this is what we can do to any coordinate we choose to apply it to, including the ones in Natanz. The honest strategic assessment as of the morning of July 15th requires confronting the gap between the pace of American capability destruction and the rate at which the IRGC is still able to fire on ships. 2 vessels received warning fire from the IRGC Navy in the past 24 hours. Bahrain was hit overnight. Iranian missile launches were directed at Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain simultaneously. 7 hours of strikes and 4 strikes in Khuzestan province have not yet produced the operational condition where the IRGC cannot fire on anything at all. That gap is real, and honest analysis requires acknowledging it. What is also real and honest analysis requires acknowledging is the trajectory. The 300-plus targets destroyed across 3 weeks of strikes are not being replaced at the same rate they are being destroyed. The eastern rail corridor to Russian and Chinese supply chains is gone. Chabahar port is burning again rather than being rebuilt. The interceptor inventory in Gulf states is being consumed by wave after wave of Iranian missiles that the IRGC cannot replace faster than they are being fired. The financial infrastructure is under maximum sanctions pressure. The underground facilities in Shiraz are being struck by penetrating munitions that are specifically designed to reach them. The trajectory runs in one direction. The question is whether the trajectory reaches its conclusion before the IRGC executes something, a kidnapping, a Pickaxe Mountain deterrent threat acted upon, a strike that kills American personnel at scale, that changes the political parameters of the campaign from sustained degradation into something that requires a different kind of response. The structural risk that defines the most dangerous variable in the current picture is Pickaxe Mountain itself. The facility under the mountain at Natanz represents the last remaining Iranian asset that could produce nuclear capability if the regime survives this campaign and rebuilds its conventional military strength. President Trump has publicly committed to taking it out. Iran has publicly warned that striking it will cause regional catastrophe. Both positions are on the public record. The operational question, which munition, which platform, which timing, which combination of American and Israeli assets executes the Pickaxe Mountain strike, is the one that has not yet been publicly answered. But the sequence of events currently in motion, sustained daily strike waves degrading conventional military infrastructure, the strait contested but with commercial traffic diminishing towards zero, Israel assessing full-scale wars coming within weeks, and the American president saying one way or another, suggests that the Pickaxe Mountain question is closer to its operational answer than any previous moment in the history of the Iranian nuclear confrontation. And so we return to where this began. 6 a.m. Eastern on July 15th, 2026. Waves of United States Central Command strikes launching against Iran. The smoke columns at Chabahar port rising again from a facility that was supposed to be Iran's untouchable economic escape valve. The explosions at Shiraz past the mountain line, where the underground facilities holding drones and missiles are now being reached by penetrating American munitions. The 7-hour strike wave from July 14th that preceded the 6 a.m. launch by less than 8 hours, with no operational pause between them. The IRGC still firing on ships, still launching missiles at Gulf states, still issuing statements through AI avatars and proposing that its officials kidnap American soldiers to use as leverage. The battle for the Strait of Hormuz is being fought at 6 a.m. and at 10 p.m. and at every hour in between. The MOU is torched. The ceasefire is over. Pickaxe Mountain is on the targeting list one way or another. And somewhere beneath the mountain at Natanz, Iranian nuclear scientists are working in the most fortified facility they believe exists on Earth, under the protection of a mountain they believe no bomb can penetrate. The President of the United States has said otherwise. 7 hours of strikes yesterday, waves already launching this morning, and the American military has never yet encountered an underground facility it could not eventually reach. The bombs are falling. The question that this morning does not yet answer, the question that the coming days and weeks will answer with operational certainty, is whether Pickaxe Mountain is next. There is one more dimension of the July 15th operational picture that the raw strike numbers and target lists cannot fully communicate, the institutional communications posture that Iran is maintaining while this is happening to it. The IRGC's published kill lists include heads of state, defense ministers, foreign ministers, and senators. Its parliament members are publicly proposing kidnapping operations. Its military officials are warning that specific nuclear facilities represent a threshold that, if crossed, will turn the region to hell. And its state media is cycling footage of what it claims is an American cruise missile being shot down over Iranian territory. Every one of those communications is designed to perform a function: deterrence, intimidation, domestic legitimacy maintenance, or the signaling to potential external supporters that Iran remains operationally capable and ideologically committed. None of them is designed to communicate the actual operational picture on the ground, which is that the IRGC is absorbing 7-hour waves of American strikes at a tempo that its logistics and reconstitution infrastructure cannot match, that its Chabahar port is being restruck before reconstruction can begin, that its underground facilities in Shiraz are being penetrated by munitions that reach below the surface, and that its Omani shipping lane is mined in ways that make the alternative commercial route as hazardous as the contested Northern Passage. The gap between the communications posture and the operational reality is itself a strategic indicator. Institutions that are genuinely holding their own under military pressure do not need to propose kidnapping enemy soldiers or warn that specific target strikes will cause regional catastrophe. They let the operational results speak. The IRGC's communications posture is at maximum volume precisely because the operational results it would otherwise point to are not the results it needs to show. The AI spokesperson does not blink. The parliament member proposes hostage-taking. The former foreign minister echoes the threat. The supreme authority that would normally impose coherent messaging discipline on all of these competing voices has not been publicly visible since February. What you're seeing in the Iranian communications environment on July 15th is an institution generating maximum noise because the signal it is being asked to transmit, that the regime is winning, that its deterrence is intact, that its military capability remains formidable, is not being confirmed by the operational evidence that every relevant audience can independently verify from strike footage, satellite imagery, CENTCOM statements, and the simple observable fact that Chabahar port is burning again while the eastern rail corridor to Russia and China remains severed. There is also a dimension that connects the current campaign directly to the Ukrainian theater and to the broader strategic picture that is reshaping the architecture of global power in ways that the Strait of Hormuz battle is both reflecting and accelerating. Ukraine has spent the better part of the past month systematically destroying the Russian maritime supply chain that was keeping Crimea functional. 28 Russian Shadow Fleet tankers struck in a single overnight operation. The Sea of Azov suspended for shipping. The Syzran oil refinery burning on the Volga. Russia's ability to supply Iran through the eastern rail corridor was already broken by American strikes on the rail infrastructure. Now, Russia's own domestic oil refinery network is taking damage at the same time that its Black Sea logistics are being shut down by drone attrition. The two countries that the Islamic Republic had been depending on to blunt the economic effect of Western sanctions, Russia as an arms supplier and an oil purchaser, China as a commercial partner and a rail corridor destination, are both managing their own strategic crises simultaneously. Russia cannot supply Iran because its own supply chains are under attack. China is watching the Strait of Hormuz disruption drive its own energy import costs upward and calculating that the IRGC's current operational behavior is imposing costs on Beijing that Beijing did not authorize. The isolation of the Islamic Republic is not just military. It is happening at the level of its supply relationships, its commercial dependencies, and the political calculations of the two governments that were supposed to prevent that isolation from becoming complete. The 6 a.m. waves of July 15th are executing in that context. Not just strikes against missile sites and port infrastructure and airport defenses, strikes against a regime that is simultaneously losing its supply chains, its logistics corridors, its economic bypass routes, its air defense architecture, its command and communications infrastructure, and its capacity to fire enough missiles at enough Gulf states to deplete the interceptor inventories that are the last line of defense for American forces and allied governments across the region. The battle for Hormuz is the visible headline of July 15th. The structural collapse of the regime's ability to sustain the battle for Hormuz is the story underneath that headline. And Pickaxe Mountain, sitting under its mountain at Natanz, is the question that all of the visible operational activity is building toward answering. The bombs are falling. The waves are launching. The before and after imagery shows blast craters where Iranian military infrastructure stood. Chabahar is burning. Shiraz is producing smoke past the mountain line. Khuzestan province missile sites are being struck. Airport defenses are being cleared. A P-8 Poseidon is watching the water for anything moving beneath it. Multiple tankers are keeping the strike aircraft airborne continuously. The president has said Pickaxe Mountain will be taken out one way or another. Israel has assessed full-scale war is coming. The IRGC is still firing on ships. The strait is still mostly closed. And 6 a.m. on July 15th is not the end of the story. It is not even close to the end. It is the morning of another day of a campaign that has not yet reached the threshold that changes everything. But that is moving toward that threshold at a pace measured now in days rather than weeks.